But with everybody catching up, when you're not improving your weakest point, you get found out. Maximilian Verstappen's words, not mine. Houston, as far as the balls that are red are concerned, I think we might have a problem this weekend at the Canadian Grand Prix. For Maximilian Verstappen has been telling anybody who would listen that they have themselves a problem, a curb-shaped problem. And we know already that the genius to Adrian Newey's design philosophy was his ability to keep a stable platform, therefore to optimise for the underfloor, the Venturi tunnels in a ground effect era. He's told us that. We know that. We've seen the underfloor, the 4D, different level settings of Checo Perez's car at the Monaco Grand Prix last year, haven't we? So we know the beauty, the genius, the quickness of the Red Bull design comes from their ability to keep the distance between the floor both as close to the track as possible and as stable as possible, regardless of the undulating circumstances. But that means a couple of different things, courtesy of the anti-dive and anti-squat. They both require extreme settings as far as their suspension, not least of which is the lateral stiffness. Again, as far as the vertical stiffness, nice and pliable, but lateral suspension stiffness needs to be crazy levels of. And that therefore means that as far as the curbing, for Maximilian Verstappen at least, it is prohibitive, or at least it has been at Monaco and Singapore last year. So how about Canada? Now, depending on who you listen to, some people say that the curbing won't be substantial, not material around Canada, and that it's more of a high-speed track. And there is merits in that, of course. But if you go and listen to the F1 Nation podcast, during which one Damon Hill speaks to the characteristic of the Montreal track, around which we will be racing this weekend, Damo says two things. Firstly, the straights are followed by super slow to medium speed turns. That's the first thing that's important. Your second thing, curbing, it's mission critical at Montreal. Ergo, Maximilian Verstappen, unless the balls that are red and the aerodynamic team led by one Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo, unless those chaps have solved for the circumstances and problems that they experienced at the Monaco Grand Prix, then Houston, Red Bull might have a problem this weekend coming. This will be a tipping point of a race, the 9th race of the 2024 season. I think this will be a tipping point. Listen, I don't want to teach my grandma to suck eggs around here, but F1 is a sport, a weird and wacky world where anything can happen, shout out to Murray Walker, and usually does. I think this could be a tipping point as the clan of a papaya-coloured McLaren car and the Scuderia Ferrari are converging upon the Red Bulls of Maximilian Verstappen now. Here's what he said, and again, I'd advise you guys go and listen to that F1 Nation podcast, because Damon Hill, legend, one-time champion in 1996, is dropping absolute bars. Tom Clarkson too, shout out to that guy. Again, different level of F1 journalism. Tom Clarkson first points out, and I think this is really important, and we need to consider this when we're contextualising this weekend's Grand Prix. If you're trying to understand the gap, the true gap, normalised for anomalous circumstances between Red Bull and the chasing pack, here's what you want to consider. Look at this, check this out. Imola and Monaco were the past two Grand Prix, right? Red Bull finished 1st and 8th at Imola, 6th and a DNF at Monaco. Ferrari, in stark contrast, were 1st and 5th and 1st and 3rd at the last two Grand Prix. McLaren finished 2nd and 4th in both the last Grand Prix and the penultimate. This is getting techie. And again, that makes you call into question the rationale behind signing one Checo Perez if those are the most recent outcomes, no? True or false? Maybe it's me being noddy. Damon spoke to the tiny turbo that the Ferrari benefits and is also detrimented by. The tiny turbo means it's agile. You'll see Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz super agile on the throttle on the combined exit from these turns. That characterised Charles Leclerc's brilliant performance at Monaco. But again, he's benefiting from these tiny, more agile turbos. The bigger turbos, you will absolutely get more upper end out of, more maximal velocity, more absolute terms, maximum output. But tinier turbos, again, they take less time in spooling, right? So on the exit of the turn, you're going to get more oomph. Ferrari again look to take advantage of that at the Canadian Grand Prix, and again courtesy of one-time F1 champion Damon Hill. Damon says there is time in riding curbs around Canada, and that is key. Maximilian Verstappen has told us that the one thing that RB20 cannot do is ride curbs. Adrian Newey has set up that car to go brilliantly around 80%, the most frequently occurring circumstances on the F1 calendar in 2024. That means then that curbing isn't a frequently occurring circumstance, right? But at the tracks, therefore, where curbing is a thing, when there is lap time to be gained from curbing, the geometric racing line, straight lining chicanes, Red Bull are always going to struggle. Please see you as you exhibit A, Singapore last year. Please see you as you exhibit B even, Monaco this year. What are we doing? It's going to get techie. I'm telling you, Maximilian Verstappen is telling you. Damon Hill echoes those sentiments. He cites an example back in the day, 1996, when he was taking turn 2 and deliberately dangling one of his wheels over the curbs, so the curb wasn't hitting the bottom of his car. He had the curb riding back in his day, did Damon, down pat. He said you could gain via curb riding around the Montreal Grand Prix circuit, the Gilles Villeneuve circuit, anywhere up to 3/10. He said he was hacking the system, did Damo. That's what we're dealing with. Ergo, if Maximilian Verstappen doesn't have the wheels underneath him to curb ride, therefore he will experience difficulties. Ferrari, in stark contrast, have the curb riding down. We've stated on a gazillion occasions now at this point that what Ferrari have done between this season and last is turn down the absolute performance of that car and turn up the drivability, therefore suiting the likes of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz Jr. It's going to get techie. McLaren too. Imagine the characteristics of the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. Again, low to medium speed. Surely McLaren at this point, that speaks well to their papaya coloured car, does it not? Oh, but I digress. Maximilian Verstappen, in his words at the Monaco Grand Prix, he said, and again, he said a couple of things, didn't he? Because he wasn't too happy. I challenge any one of the other 19 drivers to come and jump in this RB20 and drive it quicker than me. Not too happy was the 3 soon-to-be 4-time champion, was he? None too plussed with the handling dynamic of that car. And my guy Peter Renza has it right when he's talking about Max. He won't care about the 80% of the circumstances around the calendar, the 2024 calendar. He doesn't care for that. All Max knows is that he can't drive this car as quickly as he wants to because that car cannot curb. Ergo, he's losing time each and every single lap to the rest. Maximilian Verstappen says, I can't touch any curbs because it just upsets the car too much. It's not something new. And that's critical for our understanding, right? This speaks to the fundamental flaw of the Adrian Newey design philosophy. And that, you might guess, will only be exacerbated by the fact that Adrian Newey is no longer attending these technical meetings. Pierre Vacher and Enrico Balbo, it is up to you, chaps. Mats continues, and I quote, we've had this problem since 2022, but with everyone catching up, when you're not improving your weakest point, you get found out. So last year, these problems were still there, but the gap was so material between Red Bull and the rest that we never knew. There wasn't pressure sufficient to give rise to these problems. They were masked by the material quantum, the delta even between Red Bull and the rest, the other 18 drivers. Now look, now that everybody's converging, now we've got Houston, we have a problem. Last year at Canada, here's what Max Verstappen said. This isn't a new problem. He's right. I was, a quote from Maximilian Verstappen, I was almost knocked out over that curb. Oh, the humanity. That's not to say, though, that stopped him last year, right? But again, you're normalising for the convergence of performance across the other 9 teams. This is a very different circumstance. Kenny, you're an absolute legend. Don't forget the circuit now has new curbs. So if it's anything like Austria or Saudi that have newer curbs, they may be fine. Keep up the good cut. You're a legend, Kenny. I appreciate you. Damon talked about this in the F1 Nation podcast, that the curbs are very different now as versus last year, and also very different now as versus his time. And again, he was dealing with flat under bottom cars. These guys have got Venturi tunnels. We need to get to that, by the way, because new regulation and rules are pending. We'll get to that in short order, I promise. But again, Damo said back in his day, turn 2, he hooked his wheels over the curb to ensure that the underside of the car wasn't damaged, but yet and still he could gain anywhere up to 3/10 in lap time by straight lining for these curbs. There is lap time in there. Damon Hill said as much. Making Houston, we have ourselves a race. And F1 fans rejoice, right? How can you not rejoice? What are you saying, Jomo? You're a legend. It's going to get techie this race weekend, and I'm here for it, man. Finally, we get some competition. And to be precise, I'm not sure necessarily that this is competition for the championship, not the drivers at least, because Maximilian Verstappen still has 31 points on the next best in modern day Journalese, aka Charles Leclerc. So he's got a lot of work to do, has Charles Leclerc, if indeed he's going to bridge that gap. But the salient point in and of all this is that it is getting closer. So say you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much. You're far too kind and far too generous. Shall we talk about these rules? Because the rumour is it's getting a bit techie as far as these rules, 2026 new rules and regs pending. You will hear from the FI over the next couple of days. But the rumour mill, if that's such a thing, if the F1 curb is a thing that we can be invested in, there's going to be a couple changes technically to the way that the cars look. The side pods will change, the rear wing will change, the beam wing will be symmetrical airfoil design that is mostly structural, etc, etc. All very boring stuff. The diffuser will be super short and not big and massive. All of this is chaos. However, here's the big ticket item as far as the 2026 rules and regs are concerned, and the technical specification around the car that meets for those. Here's this. 2026 cars will move away from ground effect and have flat floors again with steeped rear floor edge like in 2021. Oh, the humanity. What are we doing? No more ground effect as at 2026. Oh, the humanity. New old school. What are we doing here? That is absolutely bonkers. No more ground effect as of 2026. What? You mean to say these teams have been developing these cars pretty much non-stop, and now all of a sudden these rules and regs are going to completely do a 180? Oh, the humanity. What does this mean then? Does this take away the perceived durable competitive advantage from a god tier aerodynamicist like an Adrian Newey, who will potentially move to Ferrari or McLaren as at 2025? Does this redress the banners, take away the advantage from? I have no idea. History absolutely is repeating itself, Macon. Some say that F1 history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, right? Each and every single time we get a paradigm shift as far as the rules and regs are concerned, it shuffles the competitive deck, doesn't it? It completely it reshuffles, rebalances the competitive landscape. And I am here for that. I'm here for that each and every single time. However, you know what? Say that. What? Wind your neck in a tad, Cameron. Because what if we get between now and the end of 2025, what if we get the competition that we'd been hoping for since the end of 2021? Is this going to be another circumstance where we shuffle the deck and one or two teams inevitably gain a march? There's always one or two, isn't there, that nail the regulations better than the rest. And then inevitably that spits in the face of the cost cap, right? Designed to level the playing field, make sure the likes of the back markers and the midfield are up top. Inevitably, it never happens. This is chaos. I don't know. I just hope, I'm a simpleton as ever an F1 fan. I just hope and pray that between now and the end of 2025 that we can get some competitive racing, and I'm hoping that the Canadian Grand Prix is going to be proof positive of that thesis. Exhibit A, indeed. There is other news, however. Jack Doohan apparently is going to be in free practice in Esteban Ocon's Alpine. That's chaos. I figured that Bruno Furman, so fuming was he with Esteban Ocon that he would want Jack Doohan to replace him for the entire race weekend. However, there is legal ramifications, right? And Alpine, what they do not want to do is end up in a similar circumstance to that which they experienced on the back of the Oscar Piastri fiasco. L'Equipe says that their legal counsel said that there was cause, that you don't want Esteban Ocon to turn up at Montreal with bailiffs and legal counsel that says he is owed a drive. Ergo, I think this is a compromise, a halfway house of a solution, that Bruno Furman still gets to see the merits of young driver Jack Doohan, who could potentially be in that Alpine seat for 2025. That's an option, right? So we'll see, all eyes on Jack Doohan, how he measures up against Pierre Gasly for the free practice sessions that he'll be participating in. Esteban Ocon, I can't help but feel bad for the dude. I feel like he's been a bit of a patsy, a scapegoat for the not insubstantial, multitudinous iniquities of that French team. They are in chaos, ladies and gents, for the avoidance of doubt. A French team with a French engine that have no idea. Two French drivers who are antagonistic, who do not like each other. What do we do with that? How do you solve for that many-faced God problem? I have no clue. It is bonkers. Esteban Ocon might be the worst. His leaving may be the worst or the best thing that happens to Alpine. There is no telling. How about the car? How about the key senior stakeholders that want to divest out of, at the very least, building their own power unit, at the very most, F1 tyre? I have a feeling the likes of Lucky Sons, Andretti Global, High Tech will all be having a look at Alpine, analysing whether there is the potential for an acquisition, because you remember, our mate, our old friend Mohammed Ben Sulayem, head of the FI, has said that the best way, the line of least resistance, if indeed you harbour ambitions of entering F1, is to buy yourself a team. Waiting to 2028 for Andretti Global might not be the best way forward. And that's where Alpine come in. And Haas potentially, although I think that's a little less likely now. Getting chaotic. What are you saying, Jay? Mercedes boys can't build Series A. Oh gosh, Jay, are we going to get techie on Mercedes? Look, you heard me talk about the Canadian Grand Prix as a tipping point. And here for Mercedes, the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, this track is where the wheels meet the road. This is a technical litmus test, if ever there were one. No longer can they blame and scapegoat correlation. They've redesigned the car. No longer have we got zero pods. Now is the time to see some incremental gains. Lest we forget that there is acrimony within that team. Lewis is not happy. Lewis normally doesn't make a PR misstep, always back in the team. You've heard him, even in the worst circumstances when results have been bad and the car's been an absolute dog. Toto Wolff telling him, just drive the car, Lewis. We know it's bad, but just drive it. Even in those worst circumstances, Lewis, 9 times out of 10, comes before the world's press and media and puts a smile on his face. The team are working really well back at the factory. We're bringing upgrades. You can almost copy paste that onto Lewis's press conference or his interviews before the world's press and media in the pen. You'll say something similar to that. Now, however, he has had enough. I would have liked to see him take some sort of culpability around his performance at the Monaco Grand Prix, in qualifying in particular, lest we forget, as versus one George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, in qualifying season today, out of 8 appearances, George Russell has out-qualified Lewis 7-1. And it's not too dissimilar in terms of their performances in the race. I want to say 6-2. Or 5-3. It's material is their difference. Now, we can all put on our tinfoil hat and lean into conspiracies. However, surely there is some culpability to be had from Lewis Hamilton, right? Sometimes, and listen, this isn't brand new. If we're talking about qualifying performance, let me preface everything I'm about to say with this before the cult LH massive, condemn me to life behind bars. Look, Lewis is brilliant, right? 7-time champion. Nobody's going to take away his accolades from him now or ever. However, if F1 is a sport where what have you done for me lately matters, if you were only as good as your last performance, then this is important, right? Especially qualifying pace. Where has that gone for Lewis? Where has it gone? Non-rhetorical question. 7-1 to George. Now, I leaned into the tinfoil hattery a couple of weeks ago and said, listen, there's no way that Lewis is 7-1 down in pace on George Russell. As quick as George Russell is, as hungry a young lion as George Russell is, 7-1 surely isn't representative. But maybe it is. How do I know? How do I know? They say at 39, soon to be 40 years old, that F1 is a young man's game. And the first thing that goes is pace. You only need to go and have a look at the Spaniard, the man from Oviedo, Asturias, Fernando El Pan Alonso. He is now being roundly out-qualified, or at least of late over the past 3 races, by his teammate Lance Stroll. And we can all agree that Lance Stroll isn't the quickest qualifier nor the best driver on the grid. He's outperforming, or at least he has outperformed his teammates in quali over the last 3 races. You tell me what that means then. People want to talk about Lewis Hamilton will live forever, Fernando Alonso too. Listen, F1 is a young man's game. Only 3. Lewis will hit 40 years old next year, the big 40. Fernando Alonso is already 42 or 43 years old. People say that he hasn't dipped in performance. Listen to me, hear me now. And hear me clearly. If we're talking about Father Time is undefeated, undisputed. It is a matter of when and not if. People can cite Tom Brady and LeBron James all they want to. They are the exceptions who prove the rule. Now, the naysayers will say that, listen, F1 isn't that physically demanding. You're comparing athletics to F1. Listen to me. Spatial awareness and reaction are a thing in Formula 1. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Catch this. If you want proof positive, you only need to look back in history. Now, there are drivers who have won championships late into their 30s. Please see Mario Andretti, 38 in 1978. Please see Nigel Mansell, 38-39 in 1992. There have been old drivers winning championships, but if you do this, if we're going to get serious with this and do some hard brass tack statistics, 3 drivers ever have won a Formula 1 championships at the age of 40 years old, what Lewis will be by the time he gets in that red car. Those are 1950 Giuseppe Farina, 1966 one Jack Brabham, and 1957 one Manuel Fangio when he won his last one. 3 drivers ever at 40 years old or older. So you then tell me in the chat, tell me this. If you needed to put your mortgage on whether a driver will ever again win a championship at 40 years or older, are you going to pick yes or no? Yay or nay? Are you buying or selling? Take out Lewis Hamilton's name from this. And again, I know that's fool's gold to an extent. But if you know that 3 drivers ever between 1950 and 1966, by the way, which is like 56 years ago by now. Forget my maths. That's longer, right? 60 something, 58 years. That's a long time ago. F1 was a different thing in 1966, a completely different entity to whatever it is now. 40-year-olds do not tend to win championships. Their pace goes, they're competing at the highest level with young, hungry lions. Max bloody Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lando, Oscar Piastri. They only get younger and more hungry. Good luck if your name is Fernando Alonso or Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton and you're 40 years old upwards trying to beat these young, hungry lions. Alonso can't even out-qualify Lance Stroll, notwithstanding anomalous circumstances, but it is hard. Statistics and history are up against both of these two. So nobody's in the 70s, in the 70 years, hybrid, 3 of them. The first F1 race was 1950, yeah? 1950, Giuseppe Arena was like 40 something. Juan Manuel Fangio won his last one in 1957. And the only other driver, Jack Brabham, in 1966. What are we doing here? Unlikely, Jay, to say the bloody least, mate. But you know what? I digress. Lots of news going on. Regulations pending over the next couple of days. That will get techie. We all look forward and watch and wait to see how it pans out this weekend for Maximilian Verstappen in that Red Bull. Curbing is going to be the word of the weekend. How much curb can he take? Because if he experiences similar difficulty to what he experienced at Monaco, Red Bull in the hands of Maximilian Verstappen could well be in trouble. Expect Charles Leclerc and Scuderia Ferrari to go well because, again, for whatever they've lost in absolute terms performance, they've dialed up that drivability. That in turn suits Charles Leclerc because he can ride curbs till his heart is content. That's the way he likes to drive. Some of his unforced errors in recent history, mention no names, Imola of 2022, I think, or 21 when he spun out. Curbing. Excessive curbing, excessively twitchy car. It's going to get techie, ladies and gents. I cannot wait. What's going on, CBD? It will get techie. Tyson, you're a legend, but I digress. It's coming, Tyson. It is going to be techie this weekend. We'll be here for qualifying 30 minutes before. We'll be here 30 minutes before lights out on Sunday. It will get techie. The world of F1 watches and waits with bated breath to see whether Maximilian Verstappen can turn around his fortune. Curbing will be the word of the weekend. See what Checo Perez can do. Hopefully, per his fans, he can be the second driver that Red Bull, Max Verstappen and Christian Horner, no less, all hope he can be. Lest they have massive difficulty retaining what is their Constructors' Championship. Prosecution rests. No further questions.